Good morning.
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 So this morning we're going to talk about a very important topic. You know what it is?
The buyer brokerage agreement.
Buyer brokerage agreement, right? Because we've been talking about getting them to the appointment. We've been talking about how to do the appointment and why it's important to do a buyer appointment instead of just going and meeting them at a house, right? Because we want to be professional. We want to provide a level of service that is above and beyond the average agent, right? So if you're paying attention to this, that means that hopefully that means you want to be better than average. All right, so let's talk about the buyer brokerage agreement. First of all, what is it different about this buyer brokerage agreement? What makes it unique to us?
It's got our name on it.
Give you a hint. When you go into Forms Pro, there are two options. If you use the buyer package, the office buyer package, this is the one it will put in. If you don't think you need all those forms, which is a mistake, but let's just say you don't think you need all those forms, and you want to just add a buyer brokerage, and you add the GAR buyer brokerage, you are now adding something that is not company specific. It is generically written for all brokerages in the state of Georgia. Which one do you think I want you to use?
This one's ours.
Right? Why?
Because we've already been through it, looked over it, and it's got everything that we need.
Our attorneys wrote this for us, not generically, for us, for our company, the way we work, training, so that it fits with your business model and our company. Okay? So please use this one instead of the other one. All right. So let's go through and look through it. It's a pretty straightforward document. The first blank is the buyer's names, right? So it says, for in consideration of mutual promises contained herein and other good and valuable consideration, Bob Jones as buyer, hereafter referred to as buyer, and you'll notice it's pre-populated with Coldwell Banker Residential Brokerage. I often see people write their name in there. Does not it say as broker and its affiliated licensees? So it's the brokerage name there, not yours, okay? Your name comes later. Trust me, you're in there somewhere. And then you put today's date. It's an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. And it says that the buyer is hiring the broker to act as the buyer's exclusive real estate broker, an agent to assist in buying and locating and negotiating the purchase or exchange of real property. That's important. Why is that important? Why does it matter? Why do we care? Why do we want to get this signed?
Because we want to be the only one helping them buy the house and get paid.
Why?
Make money.
So that you can get paid, right? Why else do you want them to sign it?
So they don't go somewhere else.
What can't you do if they don't sign it?
You can't represent them.
Can't advise them in any way. Because as soon as you advise them, you've broken the law. Now, are there agents every single day that advise people that are not their clients? Yes. But there are also people out there that do all kinds of other things that break the law, and we don't want to do that either. So we want to be ethical. We want to be above board. That means we don't advise people that we don't have an agency agreement with. That's both listing and buyer side. You can't advise people of something on a professional nature unless you have an agency agreement, or you're breaking the law. Okay? So it's very important to present that. That's why we want them to sign this. Not just so that we get paid, not just so that we CYA, but so that we can actually be of benefit to them. Because without that ability to advise them, what are we? What purpose do we serve? Right? None. So, the term. Let's talk about the term. The term is from date 1 and continue through date 2. How long should you make a buyer brokerage for?
40 days. No, 90 days.
Okay, what if they're going to buy something in the next 2 weeks? Should we still do 90 days?
if you find something in 2 weeks, there's no guarantee.
Okay. So what if they say, well, I'm in a lease and it ends a month from now, or I'm moving here 2 months from now? What do you do?
I'd probably even put it in for 6 months.
I think longer is better, because you can always terminate it. You can always agree to dissolve it. But why not give yourself some breathing room? If they say it's going to be 2 or 3 months before they buy something, let's go 5 or 6 months so that we're making sure that as life happens, they don't get pushed out. There's no reason not to do it for longer, okay? Now, you have to understand that when you sign a buyer brokerage agreement with somebody for 6 months, you are committed to them to help them for 6 months. And that can work negatively in your favor too. That can go against you. So you have to take that into consideration. And you've got to decide for you what works best for you.
Can you terminate this yourself?
You can. Either side can terminate. Okay? Now, there are different ramifications of termination, but either side can terminate. Now, here's the other thing. A lot of times, what's a common objection to a buyer brokerage? If I try to get you to sign a 6-month buyer brokerage, what's the #1 objection that I'm going to hear?
What if I don't like you and I don't work for you?
I really don't want to lock myself in.
I
Do
don't
I have to
lock
lock
in.
into that long of a contract with you? No, we don't have to lock into a contract that long. What can be our fallback?
You can make it specific for one property,
You
and you
could.
can make it for 2 days or 3 days or whatever,
You could.
and then renew if you both parties agree that they want to renew.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you got somebody that's coming to town, they're here for the weekend, make it for the weekend. It's an extremely effective process. It allows you to advise them over the weekend. And if at the end of the weekend you've done your job correctly and they're not crazy, you both choose to move forward, then you both choose to move forward. So that's really not a bad strategy. Don't necessarily try for the 6 month. Now, is the 6 months safer than the 2 days? Sure, you got a longer time frame. But, again, you might want to do it from a shorter time frame and then be able to extend. Now, that puts the commitment back on you that you have to actually provide a level of service that they're going to want to move forward with. Okay? But you can set yourself apart too, because you can say, a lot of agents either don't address the buyer brokerage agreement, so they're just breaking the law and advising you without a legal representation, which is, I don't think, okay. Or they're trying to lock you into 6 month or a year buyer brokerage agreements. And the reality is that we might not get along. You might think, I don't know what I'm talking about. I might think you're crazy. Why don't we do a week? And then if at the end of that week, we're still working well together, then we'll extend from there, because we can always extend, right? Because then my commitment is that I have to prove to you that I'm going to do the job right. Wouldn't that make a consumer feel more comfortable than saying, well, I really need to get a 6 month, I need you to sign this, it's going to lock you in for a year, and you're going to go. Okay?
Okay.
So term is really important. All right, independent contractor relationship. This talks about the independent contractor relationship between the broker and the buyer. We're not employees. You're not an employee of the buyer, and so forth, back and forth. Our duties to the buyer. Our duties to the buyer to attempt to locate a property suitable for the buyer to purchase, assist to the extent requested by the buyer in negotiating terms and filling out pre-printed real estate purchase and sale agreements. Why does it say pre-printed real estate purchase and sale agreements? Why doesn't it just say?
We're not attorneys and we can't write.
Because we're not attorneys, we're not allowed to write contracts. So we need to set the expectation that we're filling in the blanks, because we're not attorneys. Now, what if they say, well, then how are you going to, what if something special comes up? What if we've got to write something up that's, unique to this property? How do you handle that objection?
Oh, well, I can call my lawyer and she'll get back to me. that
Now,
Tuesday.
lawyer on speed dial, I can get something written up and we can add it. It's not a problem. Okay? And then, of course, the last one is say comply with all applicable laws in performing its duties hereunder, including brokerage relationships and real estate transactions act, ... It's important. I think it's important to set the standard. What's the biggest issue with realtor reputation in the world? Trust factor, right? They all think we're slimy salespeople out to just make a buck. Prove them wrong. Start up front with proving them wrong. Okay?
Right. Tell me more about the breaking the law if you don't have this signed. Who's going to know you're breaking the law?
If they report you to GREC, then GREC will investigate, and if they find that you've broken the law, then they'll fine you, or at worst, remove your license. And then you don't get to be a real estate agent anymore.
Okay.
So, I mean, all it takes is them reporting you, or another agent that you come across reporting you, or something going sideways. So, for instance, if you were to go into this and we were to work together but not have a buyer brokerage, and I was going to advise you about a whole bunch of things, there's nothing, which we're going to get to in a minute, there's a lot of disclaimer in here that protects you, that says, you know, I'm not an expert in all these other things. You know, you need to rely on other things, much like in the purchase sale agreement. Then you end up buying a house because I said it was a great deal and you were going to make a bunch of money. And you come back and sue me. Well, guess what's going to get involved with that? GREC's going to be pulled into that as well, because you acted as an agent without an agency agreement. So it's the same concept of, you know, if it's a 55-mile-an-hour zone and I go 60, I'm probably all right, right? So at what point are you not okay?
When they catch you.
Exactly. So, you know, the reality is if you never go above 55, you know for sure you're going to be safe, right? And as long, it's a risk reward thing. If you go above 55 and you go 60 and you worry, well, what is the risk? The risk is a ticket, and the ticket's going to be $200. Well, I'm late. Maybe it's worth risking the $200. I know I'm not going to jail for it. Okay. The risk for this is losing your license and never being able to practice real estate again. So go find another job.
So I think the bottom line on this is to your very first meeting with the buyer, you've got to have them sign this at the very first meeting.
Well, and that's why at the last session, we talked about the appointment, right? And we went over the whole appointment. The whole purpose of the appointment is no different than the listing appointment. At the end of the buyer appointment, it's the same thing. Okay, great, let's work together, sign hard, press hard, 3 copies, ... the old saying. All right? That's the purpose.
So if
It's
the buyer refuses to sign in the first buyer meeting,
Then don't work
doesn't
with them.
want to sign this, then you just don't work with them.
That would be my choice.
That's the way you have to play
But that's,
hardball.
you know,
have
you've
to
got to
play
make a
hardball.
decision in your business. Is that, are you willing to risk it or not?
Right.
And for me, I'm not willing to risk it. And I don't think as a brokerage, we are willing to risk it at all. So, you know, if you're going to continue to do that, then that's not necessarily something that's going to continue to work here. Okay? Let's talk about commission, because we got to talk about money, right? So the next section is commission. Broker's entitlement to commission. There's a percentage there, and there's a dollar amount there. What number should you put in there?
7%.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
12%.
Okay. It's a buyer. For me, I'd put like 40%. I'm going to get really paid because I don't like working buyers. But why, you know, what would you consider a normal commission for you? What number would you want to put?
3%.
Okay. What about 3.5? 4? Now, here's the reality. If you don't put a number there, is this paper worth anything?
No.
Pretty much no. So you need to put a number there. Now, remember, this is only our side of the transaction. So you're only going to get paid on your side of the transaction. But the reality is that what if you come across a for sale by owner that isn't offering a commission? Now you're going to have to basically manage the whole transaction, both sides of the transaction, and you're only going to get paid for half of it. So what does that mean? What are you worth? What are you, what is your value? And so I would say I would never put less than 3.5 in there personally. In fact, I might lean towards putting 4. But here's the other thing. If you read this paragraph, this series of paragraphs here about commission, what does it commit the buyer to?
And then commit them to making up the difference.
It does. So if you go and sell them a listed property and the co-op commission is only 2%, and you put 4 in here, that buyer's responsible for making up the other 2%. They have to pay you on the HUD that additional 2%. You need to make sure you explain that to people. You also need to decide, are you worth it or not? Because the problem is when you represent a buyer and you bring them into another listing, say you bring them into a listing that they only offer 1%. Must be totally ridiculous, right? They only offer 1%. Are you worth more than that? You're allowing someone else, the listing agent, to set your value if you just default to what the co-op commission is. And so you need to let your client know, and that's why you do this at the end of the buyer presentation, just like you do the listing at the end of the listing presentation, right? And the conversation is the same as in a listing presentation. The listing presentation, the conversation's easy, right? It's, commission is very simple. I charge 3.5%. What do you want to offer the other side? In the buyer conversation, it's the same. I charge 3.5% because that's what I'm worth. Now the reality is that not every broker out there thinks they're worth what they're worth, and they really, to be honest, aren't all worth that. But I know the value of what I'm going to bring to you is going to more than make up the difference. And so you're going to be happy if you have to pay 0.5% to bring it from 3 to 3.5. Because I'm going to do a much better job. And the reality is if I'm willing to give away my money now, what do you think I'm going to do with yours? Right? And that works on buyers and sellers. Because your job is to be their fiduciary responsible party. You're responsible for protecting their fiduciary interest. So if you can't stay on top of that and be responsible for that, then what good are you? What value do you bring? So go ahead and set the tone that you're going to bring that. The $195 broker-only commission. Who pays that?
Buyers on the closing. Seller or buyer.
Whoever your client is, right? And so your client should be paying that. It's part of the way we structure our commission. It's part of how we pull that together and put that in. Okay? All right. Moving on through the commissions. The next one, it talks about separate commission on lease. Why would you want to fill that in? And what would you put there? What would be the purpose? Because your intention is to sell them something, right? But what if they end up leasing something?
You recoup something, at least.
Right. Because if you don't put anything in there, what are you going to get if they lease something? Nothing. Maybe if the co-op offers something, you might get something.
$300.
So feel free to write something in there.
What would you write in there?
It depends on what you're doing. If you're working, I would say that you're going to spend anything from half of the first month's rent to whatever. It's open. You can write whatever you want. What's your time worth? And if you're going to take them out to lease them something, what's your time worth? Okay? It specifically addresses commission on property sold for sale by owner. And it says, in the event buyer purchases property that is being sold by owner without a broker and the owner is unwilling to pay its commission at or before the closing, buyer agrees to pay broker its commission at or before the closing. So if the other party won't pay, they've got to pay, and that helps explain it. Then it talks about buyer default. Then it talks about the protected period in commission. And there's a blank there. And the protected period shall refer to the blank day period following the earlier of either the expiration or termination of this agreement of mutual consent. How long should you put for
I
that?
usually put 90 days.
Is 90 days long enough?
6 months.
I usually put 180.
180.
Because here's the deal. If it's viable that you go out, show them the property, find them the property, work with them to understand it, and they can wait a period of time to buy it without you and get a deal direct. Let's take for instance a for sale by owner. It's probably the worst typical case of this. They approach a for sale by owner. We go in with them on a for sale by owner. For sale by owner agrees to pay us commission, but we have a buyer brokerage in place, and everything expires in 90 days. Those two talk to each other and say, you know what? Let's just wait 3 months. We can do that, and then we can agree to be X% less, right? And that work for everybody? Everybody except for the broker, right? So I like to make it so long that it's just not even reasonable to think that they're going to turn around and do that.
You can do that on the listing side as well.
Absolutely.
Take the protection period.
Yeah. So, all right, so that's protected period. Survival, commission survives termination of the agreement. Extension, obviously.
Wait, I got a question on that.
Uh-huh.
If they decided to terminate their buyer agency with you and go to a different broker,
Unlike
does the
the
180 days still follows,
it does.
even if they have another agent?
Correct.
Really?
Because not like the listing agreement, there's a clause that says if they list with someone else and then sell the house
You're off
and
the
you've
hook.
expired, that protected period goes away.
Right.
This one does not have.
An expired. Okay. The other thing is too, so that falls back on when you introduce a property to a buyer, it's the what's
Procuring
the
cause.
procuring cost.
So if you can prove that
Prove
you're
that
the
you're
procuring cause, then you have the ability to collect a commission.
Right. You have
Okay.
to be able to prove that.
And so when you have a client that runs off, we've done this relatively frequently in the last couple of years. You've got to pay attention. What do they end up doing? Follow them up. If they end up buying a property that you went and showed them and worked with them on, then you have a pretty substantial case for getting some paid commission. Okay? All right. Extension, obviously we can extend. Here comes some disclosures. No imputed knowledge. Okay? Buyer acknowledges and agrees that with regard to any property in which buyer develops an interest, there shall be no knowledge imputed between the broker and the broker's licensees or between different licensees of the broker. Broker and each broker's licensee shall be deemed to have only actual knowledge of such property. It's good lawyer speak paragraph, right? Then there's the required state disclosures about keeping everything and about not knowingly give customers false information. And in the event the conflict between the broker's duty to not give customers false information and to keep confidence, the duty not give customers false information shall prevail. And unless specified below, they have no other known agency relationships within the parties. Disclosure of potentially fraudulent activities. It's important to let people know that if we come across a listing that the listing looks like there's some fraud going on there, we have to report it. Even if it's a property that they want to go buy, we still have to report it. Okay? Then number 12, very important, the limits on our authority and responsibility. This is the series of paragraphs that explains what we can and cannot do and what we can and cannot be held responsible for. Okay? 13 talks about our policy on agency. 14 talks about dual agency disclosure. How important is it that you explain this to someone? Just say you get a buyer comes along, they're looking for a 3-2, 5-4 and a door in Dunwoody. You don't have anything that even comes close to meeting their, you don't have any listings at the moment. You work with them for 3 or 4 months, you got them under a 6-month buyer brokerage, along comes a listing, you list the property, and the day after you list the property, the buyer calls and says, hey, I really like your listing. Now what? You represent both parties, right? That's called dual agency. This is the paragraph that explains what happens and how dual agency works. Okay? So it's very important that you prepare for that. Now, if you're paying attention, hopefully you don't just run up and list that property. Maybe you work out, not representing that seller and bringing the buyer as a for sale by owner or something. But, there are situations where dual agency happens, and even if you try to avoid it, which I suggest strongly, it still happens sometimes because you don't realize that, people change their minds and all of a sudden want something different, and kind of go from there. So make sure that you go through this. One of the biggest things is that we need to disclose and get written authorization from both parties to do dual agency, from my perspective. Okay? Designated agency disclosure. What's the difference with designated agency? Designated agency is not just you representing both sides, it's the brokerage representing both sides. So if maybe Andrew, you've got the buyer, and Pete, you've got the seller. And so you're in the same brokerage, so it's designated agency because technically both of those clients are actually represented by Charlotte versus you, but you each have your own independence to represent your own agent, your own clients.
So under dual agency, you would prefer that we find another agent to represent the other side?
It depends on the situation. A lot of times when you get to that situation of dual agency, it's because a series of misevents happened that you just ended up there. And once you represent someone, it's really hard not to represent them at that point. You can offer them the opportunity to let someone else negotiate on their behalf. The problem is you still know stuff, and so it's hard to kind of separate those things. What I always recommend is that, like you get a sign call on your property and the buyer says, I'm really interested in buying this property. Okay, great. What I'd recommend is if you're going to buy this property, let me get you another agent in my office to work with you, so that because I represent the seller. Okay? And then if this doesn't work out or whatever, then I'm happy to move forward with you, or however you work that out with the other agent, whether you get a referral fee or how that works is up to you. The reality is that most people that come on sign calls actually don't want the house that they're calling on. And so that's why it doesn't come up as often as you might think. They're typically, it's more expensive than they thought it was. It's not as big as they thought it was. It's that whatever, it didn't work out. And so then you're going to take them on and sell them something else. The problem comes in is where they say adamantly, oh yeah, no, this house is not right for me. I don't like the backyard at all. It's not going to work. Let's go out and look at stuff. Okay, great. Buyer brokerage, go out, look at stuff. Can't find anything. I think your listing's the one we really want. And that's where you kind of get yourself caught in that. Now you represent both parties and you got to work that out.
You step back and you're basically a go-between, back and forth, price, terms, conditions.
And that's the problem, is because as a dual agent, can you really truly represent either party's fiduciary interests completely? No, because you can't violate one for the other. You can't pick sides. So that's why dual agency is such a horrible thing, and I wish it didn't exist.
Well, I had a situation where I was a listing agent, and my seller had her terms so concrete in cement that the price, terms, conditions. So I basically took a step back, went over to the buyer, and they had to basically agree to everything that she wanted.
Or if they weren't in it.
Or they're not gonna get it.
Yeah.
So, and that, it was kind of a no-brainer, sort
Yeah.
of. And there was
And
really
as
no
long as
wiggle room,
everybody
you know?
is aware of the situation and you're still being honest and truthful, then, you know, you're doing what you can. But you're really not giving them the full power of your representation, your negotiation, if you're having to temper that based on the fact that you also represent the other side.
Yeah.
So the old phrase of let's just get the deal done does not represent anyone's best interest except for yours. Number 16 talks about the buyer's duties. I think it's important to go over this with the buyer because buyers don't realize that they have responsibilities as well, right? For instance, timely respond to communication from broker. What would you use that paragraph, that sentence to leverage off of? You could talk about the fact that, you know, in today's market, right now we're in a hot market, and in today's market, it's important that you be able to respond quickly when I reach out to you. I'm not gonna just reach out to you, just say, hey, how's it going? If I reach out to you and say, new listing just came on the market, I think you really need to take a look at it, here's the link. I need you to get back, I need you to look at it, I need you to get back to me quickly, because that property could literally be sold by the time you get home from work. And so we need to take an opportunity to make sure that we're jumping on things, okay? And just going through all of these things, that they're important to work with, you know, work with us, being open and honest, sharing all of their information. It's very important, right? Number 17 talks about referrals. So if there was a referral fee due, now, we don't use this inside the company. So for instance, if you got an e-lead and you owe a referral to the company, you wouldn't put that in here. But what this disclosure is really important for is if there's a disclosure of referral out to someone else. For instance, their brother referred them to you. You want to make sure they understand their brother is getting a referral fee, okay? Because it helps them kind of solidify and put that in writing and see it. The next paragraph talks about early termination. Broker shall have the right to terminate this brokerage agreement at any time by giving notice in writing to buyer 7 days in advance. However, such termination shall not limit broker's remedies under the permission paragraph. You notice it doesn't say anything about them being able to terminate. Now, they can, but that's under the default section. Now, the reality is that if they terminate and they go buy something that you didn't show them and had nothing to do with, do you have any claim? No, because you have nothing to do with that. So that's how you kind of explain it. And then under the miscellaneous section, talks about a bunch of different things. Number 20 is the receipt of the buyer of consumer protection brochure. Would you ever mark no for that?
No.
Oh, you should always give them a copy of that. Why not, right? It makes sure that they know what they're talking about. It makes sure that they have something that covers the process and they understand what they need to do. Special stipulations is where you might write in, you know, this is only for property 123 Main Street. The most frequent time that you're going to do that is if you're working with an investor. Because most professional investors are not going to limit themselves to working with just one agent. But for every property that you want to show them, you put it on this disclosure, on this contract, then that property is protected for you to work with them. Okay? Please fill out the receipt of a copy of this agreement is hereby acknowledged by the buyer and the time and date that you gave them a copy. It's kind of important.
Is that consumer protection brochure already in the form set?
Yes, it's in Garden, yeah.
If you want to go a step further on when you're showing property to a buyer, if you were, what I do, I got in the habit of doing a long time ago is I'll take the flyer, my agent copy, and I'll put the time and date when I showed the property to the buyer, so I keep that as a record. So if they did happen to go off and buy it from another person, you have
a record
I
that you
showed
showed
told them this date, this
That's right.
time.
And if you do that consistently and can prove that you always do that, then that paper has value. If you just print out something and you write whatever on it, then that doesn't work very well.
Well, can we go back to commission real quick on?
Let's get through the end and then we'll go back.
All right, okay.
So then the signature page has all of their contact information and everything. I think it's important to get all their contact information in one space. Please make sure you sign it and fill out our information and your information. Otherwise, it's not a valid contract, right? Unlike the purchase and sale agreement that doesn't require your signature to be valid, does this require your signature to be valid? Of course it does, because two parties have to sign it. You're one of them, okay? The next page is the affiliated business arrangement. This is RESPA. It's extremely important that they sign these and acknowledge and go through and give you any question of, and you can help them understand what those services are that we work with. Okay? All right, so commission. Going back to commission.
I go back to commission. What I used to always do, I was in the habit of doing, was on number 5, I would put in, 3 or 3.5 for resale property. And then I would put in an amount for new property, new construction, and then an amount for land. We used to always do that. So
we don't generally do that here.
okay.
It's not a big thing. You kind of know what people are doing up front and go with them on that. And the commission on new construction and the commission on resale here is the same.
Fluctuates. Was it 3% for new
It's the
construction?
same.
Land is like 5.
Land typically pushes up to 5%.
Okay.
If it's land, lots not so much.
Okay.
Lots tend to be 3% as well.
Okay.
And it's not, this contract is you, Mr. Buyer, are going to pay me X amount of % of commission regardless of what I sell you. Okay? And that's really kind of the way ours is designed. It's not a variable.
So you wouldn't put 5% for land?
I wouldn't.
Because your chance of them buying land are probably going to be pretty slim.
Now, if you know that they're coming to buy land and that's what they're going, then maybe your number is higher.
Yeah.
But again, it's dependent on, what do you know? That's why you want to not just pull this out, as soon as I meet you. Andrew, hey, nice to meet you. My name's Brett. Sign this. We don't do that. We go through the whole presentation. We do the pre-qualifying. We do all of that preparation work to get to the point where when we're signing this, it's not an argument. It's not a battle. It's because we are choosing to work together and move forward, and you value the fact that I'm a professional. And if we're not doing that, then you're missing that opportunity. And if you're just chasing buyers, here, let me show you this house, let me show you this house, let me show you this house. Well, you might as well get your Uber account and set yourself up as an Uber driver, because that's going to pay you more than what you're going to get paid doing that. And you're also breaking the law. All right? Any other questions?
That's it.
Awesome. That gets us through buyers pretty much. Although next time we could potentially go through and talk about doing the showings and how to manage that process if we want. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Awesome.